Oh, did we?
Sorry.
Now people can hear us?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So anyway, we collected, after what we collected, the district paid out $108,000 still to help those athletics move on. The proposal that
So
go ahead, please.
just to give a little background, so pay for play, we focused on the district expense that we were subsidizing back to the high school. So the pay for play was a district covered expense. So the high school has ways to raise money and partially pay for their referees and day-to-day activities.
Is that from Gates? Did they get money
Yeah,
from Gates?
from
and
Gates.
Concessions?
When they host
Yeah,
Hosting
tournaments.
fees. So that didn't exist for the middle school. So that's
Okay.
where that gap was.
yes.
I quite frankly, I just learned about that. So what we focused on pay to play was from a district expense, so which came out of general funds.
Right.
Due
Not
to the
funded.
fail levy and the cuts from COVID, and that, like having to cut that $1 million out of our budget.
Yeah, so we had what the state budget is, and that doesn't cover all of our expenses. It cover our full busing, our after-school busing, coaches' salaries, all those things. So that became a district expense. And then after the levy, we had the $1.5 million levy. We also cut another $1 million out of that budget. So that's all district numbers.
Right.
So I just want to kind of clarify
Yeah.
that. So
Perfect. And so as in talking with Alicia regarding what our condition is and our ability to pay, because what we don't want is we don't want it to be a burden on families. We want as many students to be able to participate and play, especially at the middle school. We want students to be able to explore and try some of these things. And so what we were looking for, whatever ways we could to try and bring that down a little bit, just to be hopefully encourage as many of our students to be able to play and not be a hardship on our families. So my proposal to the board would be that for this coming year, instead of $150 at the high school, that we lower that to $80 per student per sport, with no charge for a third sport. And then at the junior high, we lower that to $30 per student per sport. However, with the middle school, that we would take 15,000 of what is raised by that pay to play and leave that at the middle school and not have them send that to the district, so that they can manage all their programs and be able to pay for those programs. And that would leave, that would generate, if the numbers from last year were similar in terms of the number of students that were participating, that would generate about $43,000 to help offset, not as much as what was being offset previously, but in looking at our budget, that was something that we felt like we could do without causing a problem with our overall budget. I just wanted to add this in here as well, that the transportation at Middleton Middle School and Middleton High School, we would plan on providing that both to and from extracurricular events. And that was actually already budgeted in as the budget was created.
Right.
So the estimated transportation cost would go up for extracurriculars from the previous year because of that return trip. And then I've asked the athletic director to just be watching, to get a kind of a tally on that, so that if we see that students aren't, if buses are coming back with 2 or 3 students, that we maybe come up with a different plan for doing that in the future, but to monitor that throughout the year so we can report back to the board.
So this money, when they collect it, it comes to the district office. It's not held at the high school.
I mean, it's held until it's all there and
Right.
then, but they don't spend anything
Okay.
of that. And the same for the junior high, the middle school last year.
So the 25 they got before, is that from activity cards?
I'm gonna look over
Just
to,
curious.
No, it was just an activity. We didn't use the word fee. I can't remember what
I
we
don't
used
remember
Um,
paying that
per,
ever.
per sport.
Did you?
Like you just had to pay it once. I only.
So it was a one-time fee. When did that start?
Oh,
Sorry,
It was there before I was there.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right. It's just I haven't had, obviously had a kid
I
there.
like that idea just because I don't feel like they're double hitting parents. Like I
Yeah.
feel like if you're like, no, we'll just keep the money, not give them their 15,000 and they have to go fundraise for it.
right,
It's the same people that are
Yeah.
paying for it,
Right.
right?
Yes,
Plus it takes their
yes,
time. So I'd
yes.
rather just pay the money
Yes, I would
and
too.
save everyone, let them spend their time doing other things. If that's something the district can just,
Yeah.
if the district can gather it and still give it, so you
Yeah.
guys provided what they need and just do it at one shot. I think
No,
that's
I think
better.
so.
And it's a lot less than what they had last year, so.
any other questions or concerns? And I don't, Kirk, when we have this, a discussion item that's a link to a possible action item, do we wait till the end? Have you typically waited and then do
Yeah,
the
typically,
action
yeah.
items together? at
We
the
have.
end? Okay. But because this is a change in the fees, it would require an action item from the board.
Any other discussion from you guys? We can also discuss later too, but.
No, I think it looks a lot better than it did.
All right, we'll move on to the next discussion item then. Review for district rental cleaning fees.
So last year, there was a cleaning fee that was placed anytime that a group rented the facility. And that was, from what I understand, that was collected regardless of whether they were, a for-profit entity or just a group trying to do a practice in the gym. And as we looked at the fees, we felt like it was a $25 fee. And it generated some funds, a few $1,000s, but those are fees that really could be paid with the ESSER dollars.
Yes, thank you. I was just gonna say, couldn't we pay that with ESSER dollars?
Yeah, and that's the
COVID
intent.
cleaning fee?
That's
Thank
one of the
you for catching
intents
that.
of so my recommendation would be that we remove not the rental fees, but those have been in place for quite some time, but this $25 COVID cleaning fee.
Thank you, but we never put it there.
I'm not sure how it got there.
I think people decided it was there and did it. We never proved that. Just saying.
Well, then it would be
For the
best that the
record.
board that the board take an action and say that. that's
I'm
not
just
part of
saying.
it.
I would have never said yes to that. Sorry.
So anyway, that was it's just kind of a little
Thank
thing to clean up a little
Thank
bit.
you.
That'll put it a little bit more where it's supposed to be as far as the ESSER funds.
I appreciate that.
And, the cleaning is gonna have to happen regardless.
Right.
So anyway, I think this would be a better way to use the ESSER funds that are being directed towards the district. And it's such a small amount that we can work through that. Any questions?
Thank you.
No, I think we'll move to the next item and you can define to us what an ESSER fund is.
There we go.
So everybody who's listening now can learn what actually an ESSER fund is.
Perfect. So, and I'm just gonna go through this, to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm gonna try and go through this as completely as we can, just so that no one, I don't wanna make an assumption that anybody is aware or not aware of something. But there were three basic, I just wanted to give a summary of the federal funds that we've received as a district and where those funds came from, kind of where we're at as a district on the spending of those funds and some of the things that we need to strategically plan for with the funds that are remaining. There were three basic funds. There was the CARES Act, which was passed in March of 2020, right as the pandemic was getting started. And with those funds, with that act, Middleton received what is called ESSER, which is Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. And with each act, we use that acronym ESSER to identify kind of the bulk of funds that are kind of have a broad use that we can use them for. So the ESSER funds, the ESSER 1 funds came through. There were also funds that were directed for a learning management system, funds that were directed from that act for social emotional learning. Then there are some that were directed to us from the governor's or the state's allocation. The state received a large number of dollars, and then they were able to push that out to different groups. So there were some for technology, which I put there. I left that in the description there. Middleton did not qualify for those funds, but that was another fund area that was put out for different schools. There was for distance learning.
So that technology basis, because we were kind of 1 for 1 already, is that?
It was actually based on your Title I status.
Okay.
The higher the Title I status, the more that they qualified for in terms of technology. And so, and our Title I status indicated that we would not get those. There were probably about a third of the districts in the state that actually received those specific technology funds. But we also, the LMS, the distance learning, both of those could be used for technology, as well as the regular ESSER funds could all be used for technology as well. But the distance learning, and then there was a special distribution for that most districts in the state used, including Middleton, used to pay a certain amount to teachers for the additional work that they were doing as part of COVID. So that's ESSER 1, and then ESSER 2 came as a part of what's called the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. This was one that was passed by Congress in December last year, and included another set of dollars that we call ESSER dollars that were coming to school districts, again, to be used for professional development, technology, PPE, ventilation systems. There's a whole list of things that it could be used for. The ESSER $2 are split into 2 different installments by the state. There was one installment that came prior to June 30th specifically to offset the cut to discretionary spending that the state had given us. So they cut the discretionary spending and then said, here's the chunk from ESSER 2 that should be used to make up for that. And that included some called set aside. It was set aside by the state board to shore up some of those districts that didn't quite get enough of the ESSER $2 to make up for the difference. And we received some of those.
So that was a shift in funding from state funding to federal funding.
Correct.
Right, a simple path.
Yep, the state said, this money's coming into the districts from federal dollars. We're gonna cut this amount out from this district. And the federal is gonna take over that. And it's a one-time thing. It's not something that's perpetual over years. But that also left the second half of the ESSER $2 that became available on July 1st. So that is available to us as a school district now, and that's designed to help work through the coming year. Then in March, the Congress passed the American Rescue Plan, and that included another round of ESSER dollars. And these ESSER dollars, about 80% of them have come to the district. The other 20% will be available when the state's plan is approved. The state has to have an overall plan approved by the federal government. Once that's done, they'll release the other 20%. So as you look at on the chart there, that ESSER 3 flow through dollars, we have an allocation, but the amount received is not that full allocation yet. That's the only line in here where the amount that is allocated has not yet been received by our district. And so the state of Idaho also used some of the American Rescue Plan to create what they call learning loss funds. And learning loss funds we had to apply for. It was kind of a grant. And so we applied as a school district for funds for K-12 students and specifically for K-4 students. And those funds can be used directly for intervention programs. Any of our summer school programs can be paid from these funds. And, strategically, anything that we do that's extra, we can use these learning loss funds for.
Are these funds the type like it has to be spent this year or we lose it and they'll take it back? Or
The-
we can't spend it this year, it has to be prorated over so many years?
These funds specifically have to be done this year.
Okay,
There is a section of ESSER 3 that also has some learning loss to it that we are required to set aside for learning loss. Those can be spent up through 2023.
okay, so short-term plan, long-term.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So those are the three acts that were passed and the funds that came along with them. And as you look through here, you'll see that based on what we've received, there was 6.2 million allocated to the district. And of that 6.2 million, 2.7 has already been expended through, this was purchasing, and the second page of this goes through some of the things it was used for. Chromebooks, upgrading Wi-Fi, those were big chunks of that amount. Summer school programming, even looking at updates and replacements of Chromebooks, because we had some Chromebooks within the district prior to COVID, but those were on a schedule to be worked out this year. So those, we had to use some of our funds to get that in place. The installments for the cut to discretionary funding, all of those kind of things are listed out there.
So you said the cut to discretionary funding, that goes back to the shift of the state money to the federal money.
Correct, and that was last school year.
So where are we with holdbacks on that?
With holdbacks on the,
Is there anything in the ESSER funds we have to worry about?
Yes.
How is, because I'm following what the state legislature was doing, it's not just a pure pass-through we can spend.
right.
We could still
be caught next legislative session with the legislature saying, here's another piece, we're gonna say, take that from ESSER and we're not gonna pay for that this year. Additionally, we didn't receive as many technology funds. The state didn't allocate as many technology funds to districts this year, similar to what they did last year. They cut that by about 50% because they knew that ESSER dollars were coming.
It's not bad or good, it's just we have to be
strategic.
we can't spend it without,
Right.
oh, okay.
Right, and there's one other large piece that we have to be aware of that I mentioned last month with the ESSER $3, and that is the amount that we need to set aside each year for in case the education because the stabilization fund is not going to be used. So the amount that the state has recommended is $2,000 per support unit. We have approximately 200 support units within Middleton School District. And so they recommend we hold at least $400,000 of these ESSER $3 each year. Because if the state goes over, we're going to have to foot we and all the other districts in the state will foot the bill. Now, they recommend the 2,000 per support unit because that's consistent with what's been the average over the last 2 or 3 years. It could be higher, it could be lower. But their recommendation is, because these funds can be spent until 2023, their recommendation is up until July of 2023, for each year, you need to account for roughly $400,000. Just to be cautious. And then if it doesn't, if they don't use it, then you've got those funds and you can use them in other ways. But to go and just say, well, we'd spend them now would not be a wise way to go for those particular funds. And so between that and learning loss, there's another 1.7 million that we need to make sure that we're recognizing has to be available over the next 3 years.
So we basically have a liability on our books for a total of what?
1.7.
1.7 million. So it looks like we're rich, but we're not on that
Right,
1.7.
right, exactly.
Okay.
And there's a possibility that will be lower.
It's just like a savings account that the state could pull out. We could pay more.
Right. Well, and there's 2 other things we just need to be, as we're strategically planning for these funds. We need to be aware that the COVID, it's not over, and we wish it was, but there's going to be costs associated with mitigating the effects of COVID as it continues to work its way through. So we need to be aware, we're ready for that. Because if we were to use all these funds and then there were a need for us to use those funds, they're not going to give us more. Well, I don't think they are. I mean, who knows how that's going to go. But
So if we run into like a subbing situation this year where we just need a bunch more subs, or we need to do some more
Because
online
of-
school, or come December need to have, then we need to be able to have funds
Right,
available to shift that
correct.
direction.
correct. So COVID is one part, and then the other part is just preparing based on what the legislature could do. Because it's still,
Yes. So
each
yes,
legislative
please say that.
session, we just don't, and I say that just so that we're conservative in how we approach the funds. Because if they don't get pulled, they'll still be there and available. It's not a use it or lose it right now. We've got 3 years. So those are just some things to keep in mind. But more than anything, this was as much an exercise for my sake as it was to help inform the board, because it helped me get a feel for where Middleton was in terms of spending on these.
So as the discussion goes on this money, would it be beneficial at all to create like a wish list, I guess? Like, we could use this money for this, like we know all the COVID things, we could use it, but if not, we would really like XXXX, or if we could do this and just kind of have it running and then kind of reevaluate or shore it up
Right.
every year and see where the funds are again, and then.
That would
move
be
back and forth with
worthwhile.
that.
That'd be worthwhile, and we can work with the Teachers Association, we can work with the principals as we look at those kind of, I guess, wish lists, but needs,
Yeah.
as they come
Like
up.
if we have repairs or things
Yeah.
to do that could possibly.
No, And one thing that might be an idea is that not during a school board meeting, so we could do maybe a quarterly or a half year thing where 2 board members could be there, so we don't have a quorum, but have a workshop for the community, hear their wish lists of what they want. A couple principals there, you, Alicia, so we don't get in trouble. Just to have a work session to where the community, we can just talk through that, and say we could have 2 board members there without a quorum, and
Mhm.
just kind of get a feel of this funding. I think after 2+ years now, I'm just starting to get an idea of all the different revenue streams and how each one affects the other, then how now having these federal funds come in and kind of change the lay of the land. So maybe something we could look at.
Yeah.
Just a quarterly or something, just a workshop of explaining funds, just open dialogue, something
Yeah.
I think would be
I think
How
that'd be
come-
helpful for everybody.
I will be 100% honest. I'm nervous to spend anything because I'm too afraid that they'll come back and say, just kidding.
Oh, no,
And you need to pay taxes on that. So we're just going to take it out. Like, it makes me nervous. Like, I would hate to promise something to someone or, make these plans and then all of a sudden be like, and now we have to spend all our general fund because we spent this money. Like, I mean, how confident are you that this money is like, except for the money they told us to set aside? Are we good?
Well, I'm as confident as we are in the legislature in general.
Because we kind of budget
Because-
with fake money anyway.
Because we could look at
our.
our past expenditures our expenditures last year through COVID. And I mean, I can't imagine it being worse than on as many people would as possible, but I can't imagine it being worse financially than it was that first year.
So if we use that as kind of just
a
our,
gauge,
to help us and.
then I could say in terms of planning for COVID, we could make we want to have this much available each year. As far as what the legislature might do, I mean, it's just,
Yeah, no.
I thought I had a pretty good gauge on the legislature till last year. It was so far out of what had normally happened. I would hesitate to make any guesses. But then after each legislative session, when the legislative session ended, I think it would give us a good idea of where we are for the next, that would give us a gauge. And so using some judgment in how we expend the funds up until that point would probably be wise. And then that would give us a little bit more of a gauge.
Thanks for
Yeah.
digging in. 'cause
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, this just will help us as we're moving forward and getting an idea of how we need to use the funds going. Because a lot of these, like what's happening in the classrooms, we can use the learning loss funds. Those can't be touched, that the legislature knows they can't come in and take, down to that 20% because it says in statute, we have to use it for learning loss and those grants as well.
When they say learning loss, is it strictly like math reading? Can we use it for like emotional support,
We
like
can-
additional counselors, or
We can
could it be
use
like emotional social
anything that's
support?
going to have a positive effect on a student's ability to learn.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
social
that's
emotional
good.
learning is, and I've looked at some districts, and then some districts have had some pretty unique ways of saying, like I look at what they were doing and they were saying it's for learning loss, and I don't want to give an example just to not to incriminate anybody, but it was surprising to me, and it was a stretch. But I think as long as we maintain that within our current academic program, anything we can say is going to help students learn, I think we're in good
Is
shape.
it pretty personalized to each school? Like, do the principals come and say, this is what we're hearing from our teachers, this is what we would need to help our students? Or is it like, which way is the flow of information? Is it as a district, we want to give you this? Or is it as teachers saying, this
We
is what
really
we want?
haven't established that yet. So that's going to be something that we'll be working with teachers and principals on to make sure that we're getting that communication of what is, because I would guess it's going to be a little of both. It's going to be some from the teachers and principals saying, this is what we're needing, this is what we're seeing, because a lot of it's going to be based on what we actually see
Right.
as the students come back and we're getting into the rhythm of things. But there might be some other things that we see as from the district level saying, what, here's where we could really target some, we see this data that points to a gap. We need to target that gap. And so I think it'll be probably a two-way communication.
Awesome.
So our inability to hire EAs, are any of them, are they critical to this gap management or?
Definitely.
And so is there a way to help?
Increase their pay.
I mean,
Honestly, it's a
does that mean
race out there.
And we can use we can use these funds to help bolster. But
But
as we all know, it's one
long-term,
time, it's not a
yes,
long-term
yeah.
solution. So you put it in place and then 2 or 3 years down the road, we have to.
And then
Yeah.
it doesn't pass an ordinance.
So I would say we would be, if we were going to do that, we would be looking at ways of doing one-time type things for our EAs to try and make that happen. Any other questions on that?
I'm excited. I'm like, the teachers are super creative and the principals, I'm excited to see what they come up with. See what kind of things that we can do to help the kids and
Yep,
staff be successful.
yep, that'll
I'll
be
leave
good.
that up to them. They're good at that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay,
All right, the next discussion item, we've all looked at the draft you sent out for the continuous and safe operation of in-person learning. So it's no action item tonight.
Right.
I think kind of review for our patrons where we're at, what input we'll be looking for.
right,
I know I have some public comments, but
okay. And there are two,
Mike?
there are two things that I would just say is, one is we're gonna be putting this out for our teachers and our patrons to take a look at and offer comments. So tomorrow we'll work on getting that onto the web with a link where parents, teachers, and everybody can take a look at that and give feedback. So that's an essential piece as far as you being able to utilize the ESSER III dollars. We have to have this kind of a thing in place with opportunities for all stakeholders to, and I think that's just best practice to
Yes.
get that kind of feedback. But the other part to this that we still are working through the details of is the quarantining and what that would look like. So a student has COVID, what are the steps that we take? Because we'll have to send the student home, but it's those that are around the student that we're trying to work through, whatever way we can to keep students in school as much as possible. But inevitably, there are going to be situations where some students will have to stay home as a result of contact with somebody that's been confirmed to have COVID. So we're still working through some of the details on that I'm still working on that with principals to try and make sure that whatever we do is feasible, and so that the principals don't spend their whole time
Yes.
contact tracing. There's so many other things they need to be working on, so.
well, you did mention to me that one of your major goals was trying to reduce that time of students who were out,
Yes.
never became sick, and maybe the net was cast
A little too
a
wide.
little too wide. But so I know that all this stuff is political and it's going to generate conversation, but appreciate you trying to get there for us. I mean,
Right.
we got a ways to go, but I know we'll have a plan soon for
Yeah.
sure. And I look forward to input. And
Yep, and that's the main goal is, I think I even, that I mentioned it here, is that the main goal will be keeping kids in school.
Yes.
And whatever we have to do to keep kids in school is, to me, the most important thing. And what that ends up looking like is gonna depend in large part on how, COVID comes through our community, because I think it's gonna be, and I do like the fact that public health agencies and everybody has kind of focused that on, we're gonna be looking at our community. We don't have to worry about, even our right close neighbors, we don't have to worry about what they're doing as much as what we're doing. And that'll be the focus as we move through. So,
Good.
questions on how we're moving through that?
really, Pam, you're not going to say anything.
I thought it was great.
I really
It
appreciate,
made
I just,
sense.
yeah, I thought it was,
There's a lot of, and good information in there.
and it was short. It
Yes,
wasn't 12
it made
pages of
sense.
reading.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think when we look, I think some people have been so focused on what the CDC has recommended out there. And it was the same as last year. We managed through it last year as well. And it's coming back, and mask for everybody inside, indoors. We've seen those recommendations as they've come through. I think our community's a little panicked about it when it first came out. I know your plan addresses that it's going to definitely be vaccinations encouraged, masks are optional. But Jake sent me some numbers. He can't be here tonight, but Jake did some work from Southwest District Health of last year, of the ages 0 to 18, there was a total of 21 hospitalizations. One of those
Is
in
this just for
Middleton.
Middleton?
No, that's all of
Oh,
Southwest District
okay.
Health.
Okay.
One of those was for Middleton. That's not to say maybe there's somebody out our school district that's not completely Middleton. Obviously, no death is what we want, but there was 0 death in Southwest District Health on the ages of 0 through 18. Because he's been going through and figuring out what the next strategy is. Central District Health numbers were not available in Boise, that area, but statewide from 0 to 17, there was 23,317 positive tests. Out of those, there was 171 were hospitalized. So 0.7% of those cases ended up in the hospital. Again, there was 0 deaths, 0 to 17 on his work. And he wanted to call out that there were not approximately 91 deaths by accident each year in that same range, 61 from suicide. 2020 numbers weren't available, but these are 2019 numbers. And his ask was that we are measuring everything here from a Middleton perspective, not just the CDC guideline that says, boy, wear a mask, but look at the complete picture. And I think it's really important that people know that we're looking at it from that standpoint. Because I just looked at the CDC numbers for the week ending January 31st. The rate of COVID hospitalization was what, 0.5 out of 10 out of 100,000.
In January?
The last week of July.
Oh, July.
This-
I
this-
said
this
January
July.
31st,
Yeah.
July, okay.
So these are deaths, excuse me. So it's 0.0005%. And they are asking for any mask to be worn. They're not even differentiating between cloth masks and N95 masks. So when I look back at what we did last year and how we went back to school in our grade schools in October and schools in November, we seem to manage it with washing our hands, being cognizant of distancing and just trying to, if you're sick, stay home. And now we have, if you can be vaccinated, to be vaccinated, especially for our teachers. We're not seeing this huge, spreader events with kids. It's spiked because that's what we're focusing on right now, these numbers, but I'm very comfortable where we're headed. I know we'll stay aware of what's going on. I know you'll help us lead us that, but I'm very comfortable with what we did last year and how we got there. And I think our approach going forward is solid. I know we can turn it on a dime if we need to. New information comes in. I'm personally vaccinated, so I'm not coming from an angle of not doing that. So this board's talked through all of our meetings this last year. Our numbers have been solid, and I know our focus is to go this year better than we did last year. And we look forward to your leadership. We look forward to input from our teachers, from our staff, from our parents as we go online with this. But I don't want to lose anything. We've got great momentum, and I want to keep that momentum with what we have with our community. So,
yeah, perfect. Anything else any other instructions for me as I start working through these next steps?
I think just for me, I guess I'm sure you'll keep us aware if there's any repeated or something, comments that just keep coming up over and over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like, this may not apply directly, but we're getting a lot of this, maybe we should look at it.
I also think we could do a better job of sharing our positivity rate
Mhm.
by school, by district, however we can do that without giving away personal information. But I think that would make our community feel better too, to know that we've got X amount of cases. And obviously that'll go back into our quarantining numbers and make us, if what we're doing from a quarantine standpoint, is it working or not working? So I think that would give us some validity in however we come up with our quarantine, is whether we do it weekly or monthly, maybe get some feedback from people, but I think it would be important for the public to know what we have for positivity rate numbers in our schools. And
Well, Southwest District Health is still posting by school district.
Yeah.
the positivity rate. It's just a trick to find it. You have to click on the Tableau table
Yeah,
I
link,
just,
and then you can find
if
it.
we
I
could
think
do it
that's-
for us, I just would be comfortable in our numbers of,
and I get an email each week from Southwest District Health, and so I can take that number and move it
Okay.
to a spot on our
That'd be-
website for our
that'd be
district.
good.
It might be harder to do it for each school, but I can for sure do it for our district. And I'll start looking
I don't
at
know.
how we can.
We may not wanna do it by school,
I think just in whole. I think we're still small enough if you did it by school. It could be detrimental to a kid perhaps.
I just like to see a consistent number so it's reported, so.
Well, just the more information we have, the probably easier it is to work through things.
Sure.
So yes, I hear what you're saying.
Okay. Right, anything else?
So,
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna click on that. And then it pulls up.
It's the next discussion item, report on possible board and leadership training.
And I'll just say from my perspective, I reached out to IASA. They're willing to work with us, and they've actually got a system where they will train the board and then take that training down through into the principals. So that principals, superintendent, board, all are kind of hearing the same thing. I just don't have any dates or times yet. So David Drinkman was gonna get back. I talked to him on Thursday last week, and he said he'd get with me this week.
Okay. And I'm meeting with ISBA tomorrow in person, so.
If we go through the superintendent one, does our state
Yes.
funds cover that?
Yep.
Yep.
So like our fees to whatever, or
Mhm.
state reimbursement, it doesn't matter who we use. Okay.
Yeah, so. And I'm hoping we can get a joint one and a discount.
I would hope for that too. You know how to work those deals.
So, yeah, I just think
See what you
it's,
figured out.
I think it's important with all of us new and what our team coming together, so. Whether- With that, moving to action items. Back to pay for play. I don't know if we want to make a motion, we have discussion, or
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed pay-to-play fees of $80 per student per sport for the high school and $30 per student per sport at the middle school. It's at the first two sports.
I'll second.
any more discussion? Yeah, I mean, I think this is gonna be a moving target for us as we know that if we look at what our coaches are compensated for, valley-wide, we're
Sort of.
Around the
close.
probably getting a deal.
Uh-huh.
Don't tell them all, but,
I think they know it already.
and they're here. And we also know we're pending going to a larger classification sooner or later. So I just think once again, I think this is a good community discussion point when we're talking about funds and understanding that part's not paid for by the state directly. That goes from our general funds, and
Mhm.
explaining where that is in general funds, where busing is in general funds. And I think it's very important for us to share that with the community on, here's the 85% the state pays for. And then here's the general funds piece that we divvy out. And at what point do we run out is the bucket empty? There's
Right.
more funds in it. And I think that needs to be an ongoing upfront discussion, and we need to be very clear about where our funds are at.
I agree.
I think the more transparent we can be and even to the part of when we're looking at monthly expenses, trying to figure out the best way to detail monthly expenses, if it's in buckets or so when I look at, or anybody else that goes on a website and looks at a line item, they don't have to guess what that is. And it's coded that we can actually group that
Instead of
together.
just the basic generic.
Alicia makes
Side
great
picture.
spreadsheets.
We know it takes time, sorry.
I just think in
More
transparency,
user friendly, I guess. Can you dumb it down for all of us? Thank you. That might be what I'll say it for us.
so any more discussion?
No, I think it is what it is. That's where we're going. And I mean, ultimately, call your legislature. That's who you should call. Tell them to give us more money.
With that, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
I,
Aye, motion carries 3-0. Our next possible action item, to approve or deny the cleaning fees. Pam, you want to lead the way on that?
we never approved them, so
They're
I
there now.
deny them forever.
So you're making a motion?
Do I need to make a motion?
The motion would be to
Remove.
I make a motion, we remove the cleaning fees, the COVID cleaning fees. And can I make them, add to that motion that we don't charge Middleton residents to use our gyms? Or is that pushing it too far?
I think that'd be another discussion item.
Well, let's put that on the
the.
discussion items, please.
We can do that because it's not on the agenda, but we can definitely.
I guess
I'll put that on the list.
well, thank you. I guess I have an issue with it because I know that the high school, I've helped for the last couple of years coach volleyball for the high school volleyball coaches who run a fundraiser program, which is an AAU team, but they're Middleton kids. And we unfortunately took about half of what she earned from that to pay for these COVID cleaning fees. So it's kind of a nightmare. So it kind of was infuriating to me. So I guess that's why I would say never should we charge them. So
So what was the motion?
I make a motion that we do not charge a COVID cleaning fee to people using our gyms.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
Any more discussion?
No, I'll quit. I'll get off my soapbox.
All those in favor
Sorry.
say aye.
I,
Aye, motion carries 3-0. With that, we're done with our agenda. We would offer, is anybody signed in to speak? No?
thanks for
With that,
coming.
with our agenda complete, I go ahead and go and move for adjournment.
I'll make a motion.
I don't even need a motion for that.
You
I
don't?
learned that from Robert Rules. Our agenda is
Really?
complete. And we're now adjourned.
Oh, okay, you need a gavel.
That was the one I could do though.
You're on the screen.